The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, The Employee Experience Revolution, Unicorns, the Talent Race, and Customer Success, presented by Daniella Matutes and hosted by Bestica Incorporated. My name is Ross Diaz. I'm the Content Marketing Strategist for Bestica, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. First, I just want to thank the team at Bestica and Mr. Harvinder Singh, our President and CEO, for inviting Daniella to join us. A little bit about us. Bestica is a recruiting agency based in San Antonio, Texas, with a focus on placing top candidates for senior-level user experience and design jobs. Our recruiters are Melanie, Carlos, and Kat, and they'll gladly work with you to find your next UX role. You can contact them through our community pages at bestica.com or through LinkedIn. If you're part of an organization seeking a strong UX candidate, please visit the Bestica website to contact our recruiters. During today's presentation, all listeners will have the opportunity to submit questions by typing them into the questions pane of the control panel. You can send them in at any time during the presentation, and we'll collect them for our speaker to answer at the end of her presentation. Now it's a great privilege to introduce our featured presenter today, Daniella Matutes. Daniella is a UX architect and consultant who is most well known as the pioneer of user-centered experience, which is based on the principles of human-centered design. She has worked with a range of organizations, from nonprofits to multi-billion-dollar corporations, and along the way developing a methodology for implementing the concepts of design thinking and customer experience strategy to solve organizational problems. Her well-rounded skill set includes user interface design, digital marketing strategy, service design, information architecture, and content strategy, amongst many other specialties. She's a dynamic professional and strategist who regularly wears many hats to deliver digital business transformation. She's the owner of the consultancy Daniella Creates and a graduate of the La Jolla Academy of Art. Her causes and passions included animal welfare, arts and culture, social action, and education. Now let's welcome Daniella Matutes.
Hello. Thank you, Ross, very much. What a great introduction. Thanks, everyone, for coming today. Today, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the employee experience revolution that's going on. We'll start with the why, then we'll get into the what, and talk a little bit about what that looks like in action. I'm not going to spend too much time introducing myself because Ross did such a great job. But I did want to focus a little bit on user-centered experience and how that came to be. Over the last almost 7 years, I've worked for Catapult Systems, and during that time, we've developed a way to integrate human-centered design with our technology expertise, and it's become user-centered experience. I'm the global practice lead, and besides those things, I'm also an artist. I write, and I love to be out in the wilderness, any kind of mountain biking, hiking, or river sports, paddleboarding. I love to be there. That's a little bit more about me beyond the professional side of things. So as we go through this presentation, we will, I'm sure, have some questions. And what we'd like to do is wait until the end of the presentation for those questions. So as Ross said, why don't you go ahead and type those in as they come to you, and at the end of the presentation, we will address each one that we have time to address. So many times when we're talking about employee satisfaction and system design within organizations, we talk about conducting an engagement survey. And it's really about how the organization sees the employee and if the employee is engaged or happy. But what surveys don't tell you or develop is connection, empathy, and insight, which are all very key to expert system design and achieving employee experience that's meaningful. So despite the high level of corporate spending on engagement surveys, Gallup estimated that close to 2/3 of employees are self-identifying as not engaged. And engagement means involved in, enthusiastic, and committed to their work and workplace. It's not that we are unhappy in our jobs only. It's the way that we're going about finding meaning in work is changing. So the old tools that organizations have used to measure engagement, to measure meaning, to even measure delight in the workplace no longer apply and are certainly not as useful or predictive. There's also this concept of cognitive dissonance for people in work and anytime they engage with a system. And systems aren't just technology, systems are processes. Anything the organization has in place that tailors behavior, drives behavior towards an expected outcome. But let's just take a minute and look at the cognitive dissonance that occurs when we use things like computers and technology. We see here that there are gaps between computers being incredibly fast and humans being incredibly slow. Computers are made to be error-free. We are often error-prone. We're irrational, emotional, random, unpredictable, and intelligent. And computers still, right now, today, could change in the very near future, are still stupid and immoral. So what is something that we can start with? What is an anchor point that we can start with that will help us engage with our employees at a level beyond a survey so that we can create experiences that imbue meaning, that create delight? Well, one essential component is empathy. And when we understand the perspective that someone brings to a system, we can design a system that helps to meet their needs. So often we talk about in the industry and at Catapult and in my work, taking a top-down and bottom-up approach. Always there are organizational goals and business processes and efficiencies and productivities to be expanded on. But if you're looking at a bottom-up approach because your people are your greatest asset, having empathy for them and understanding who they are is an anchor point in designing systems that work for them and create delight and meaning in the workplace. These are some things that we often hear when we're doing our work. I can't find anything. The requirement specification is too detailed to consume, or I don't want to read it. It's 400 pages long. The system is so clunky. This isn't what I thought I would have happen. I've heard that quite a few times out in the field. The system is missing a critical feature. I'll just find the data myself and dump it into a spreadsheet. It's my current understanding that I would say 2/3 of the world's economy runs on email and Excel. This isn't what I expected it to look like, feel like, work like. This doesn't map to what I do. Where did this come from? How did we get here? Meetings where we're sitting in a room and people are getting upset about the outcome of the system often come from places of good intent. And organizations spend a lot of money creating systems for an employee experience that they're hoping will at least improve productivity. So often I hear from companies, people are our greatest asset. What does that mean? especially when you have multiple devices, locations, applications, and services. Most of the time, companies are not designing a mindful customer and employee experience. It is a default that they arrive at after deploying one system after another system to meet a need. So when we start by looking at a top-down approach and we're trying to meet an organizational need without having empathy or understanding of the user, oftentimes the experience is defined by frustration, loss of productivity, low adoption, risky behaviors, and a very low sense of credibility, happiness, and satisfaction. So most employers are offering an employee experience that's fragmented. And if people are your greatest asset, not only do you lose productivity, but there's a vacuum that's created in the employee experience that is reflected in the customer experience. It also threatens the organization's ability to attract, retain, train, and sustain top-tier talent. When we use the word engagement, to go back to this idea, we limit our thinking. It assumes that what we're trying to do is reach out and engage people, rather than looking at it from an organizational perspective with some empathy and user perspective, where we're building an organization that's meaningful, exciting, fulfilling, and fun. There's a great quote by a very brilliant man who changed our world. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So often we design employee experience by band-aiding at a need-by-need basis. And then we send out surveys asking how happy employees are. And we wonder when someone's reading our digital story by accessing our website or our applications, why our customers might not experience the best and most meaningful interaction with our company. So we're coming about it from this perspective of reactivity instead of being proactive. We're coming at it from a perspective of asking, how do I see the employee? How do I see the customer? Instead of perhaps going out in the trenches, finding out how people are feeling, what they're doing, and what they're experiencing, and then coming back and combining all these insights together for a strategy and plan. To talk a little bit about the talent race that's going on right now, if your people are your greatest asset, which most companies are saying today that they are, this talent race that's going on, you can get further in it and attract, retain, and train those people by offering a mindful employee experience. That we've coined the term, and many others, it's not anything specific to us, the industry really has coined the term, of a digital workspace. So people have this experience, this connected experience over the organization where they're able to do their tasks and jobs in a way that's contextual, in a way that anticipates their needs and solves forward. A lot of talk also in the last few years has been about a unicorn and whether or not you should hire or look for this mythical beast out there in the workforce. But what I'd like to do is not spend too much time talking about whether they exist, the perfect candidate, because as we know, people are people and no one's perfect. What I would like to say is that even if you do attract a unicorn, let's say you get someone who's an enterprise architect who gets the cloud, or a business analyst that has integrated thinking. Let's say you are somehow able to locate and hire this person. When they get on board and they're of this caliber, having an employee experience that's fragmented and disjointed won't reinforce your desire to have them on board. In fact, it will erode the credibility of the organization. In addition, let's take for a minute the instance that unicorns aren't attracted. Maybe they're made. So instead of searching out there and having a recruitment plan that focuses on this perfect candidate, taking the idea of this is what we want to build. We want to build database pros that can bring structure to unstructured environments. We want software engineers that can do more than generate code. How would you go about not only attracting these folks, but building them? So a digital workspace helping employee experience will, when conducted and implemented and designed mindfully, it's been shown time and time again that you have improved employee loyalty, attraction, retention, reduction in people being gone from work, and actually leaving. In lots of surveys out there, and this one's from the Digital Workplace Group Survey, 70% of senior management is looking for ways to increase their productivity. And one thing we can talk about with the digital workspace is that it is not just a thing like an intranet. This is not an intranet. This is a mindful creation of connected employee experiences across systems, across processes. And what happens is you're able to leverage those things that you build for this across a platform. So the digital workspace is a self-sustaining ecosystem that helps with people and productivity and build out your platform, your technology platform. There's been a lot of talk also in the industry about technical debt, which is my next slide. But what I wanted to talk about first is experience debt. So not understanding the user's problem, not caring about the experience, or kicking the can down the road often leads to this thing called experience debt, which goes hand in hand with technical debt. So the question I've heard many people ask themselves, and we ask our customers when we're working with them, do your employees have the same, if not better, experience than your customers? Is your customer experience related to your employee experience, and in what way? And in what way could we transform your business in order to transform your customer experience? And when we're talking through these concepts and having these discussions, this experience debt becomes more and more of an area of focus. So it's an accumulation of poor user experience, and it's the inattention of this user experience across your organization. Technical debt is something that happens over time and has just been table stakes with the revolution that's happened in the web. We carry around a computer in our pocket and we're able to pull it out and find a restaurant based on what we feel like eating, and even have that restaurant deliver our food within 20 minutes with one application on our phone. We're able to put in a phrase and have Google finish the phrase, or Bing finish the phrase for us, and find information across the globe about that subject. These are table stakes now in a technical focused world. Experience dictates that these basic needs are met. And when we walk inside the building, oftentimes we don't experience the same thing we do on our phones, on our systems in the workplace. So what makes a great experience? When technology delivers basic needs, user experience dominates. That's Donald Norman. He is a founding father of this field. So when we've got these table stakes of technology in our pocket, what makes something meaningful or delightful even is to cross that chasm in the middle of convenience. So going back to the ideas of user experience debt and technical debt, often organizations are just trying to get up to the convenient. Our goal is to offer employee experiences that are meaningful. Another key part of this is, who are your employees? The digital natives that are out there right now have a different mindset about work and technology than all of the generations that have come before. And they're creating a new way, a change in the way work gets done. They're more focused on teams. They're more focused on technology, and they are much more social. So how do we design experiences for these folks? 2016 is the year of the employee. It's time to get to know them. Providing a delightful user experience with intended design. Having a customer experience that's reflective of your culture and values, because your employee experience is so well crafted and meaningful. You can express your culture, vision, and values through employee experience to your customers, because again, they are your greatest asset, your employees, and they are the ones that are communicating with your customers. There's a concept of digital mastery where you're actually building a relationship and capability sets around the relationship between IT and business. And of course, this isn't about running out and buying a bunch of technology or building a new intranet. This is about leveraging the foundations in place, the systems in place, and moving forward from that current state and leveraging everything you can, improving upon it, and solving forward. Digital mastery, I just briefly mentioned that. It's this idea put forth by Capgemini and MIT. And what this is using technology and leadership together to drive organizational change and create a platform that the entire company can use. So oftentimes when we're working with clients, improving their employee experience often takes these organizations on a path of digital mastery. And I do have some examples of all of this towards the end of the presentation of people we've worked with and some of the ways we've gone about doing this. So how we do this in the industry using user-centered experience at the companies I'm helping, we're very iterative, we're very collaborative, it's cross-functional, we build consensus, we are always looking at user stories and a backlog, we're program-oriented instead of project-focused, we're always looking for the minimum viable product as well as the minimum viable experience, and our focus is blend between the user and the organization to this thing called a value exchange. So how do we do that? We have a UCX methodology, and these are the 6 steps of that methodology. We never do these 6 steps in order. We're always moving things around in our way of being iterative. So oftentimes we'll get to know and we'll prototype and test pretty quickly. Sometimes for clients we'll skip the documentation altogether except for user stories and a product backlog, program backlog. But oftentimes when we talk to people, we like to show them this in a format that's step-oriented. So some of the activities we do in each of these steps, get to know. Instead of surveys, we do what are called contextual inquiries, where we go out and do ethnographic research and sit with people and do a fly-on-the-wall session. Some of the things we do during analysis include gap analysis of current state and future state from an organizational perspective, and also when we're out talking to the actual employees, watching how they work and getting information about what they're doing, thinking, and feeling, and the context that they're working in. There's a lot of perception gaps that happen between what users are doing, what management wants them to do, and what executives think they're doing. So this process, this 6-step process, really helps us understand those perception gaps. And in the analysis phase there, we are able to articulate some things that have been going on in the organization for a long time in a way that focuses the decision making on these perception gaps and how to solve them and solving forward. Documentation, again, has really changed over the last, I would say, 3 years. We're not ever on my projects when I'm working with clients creating business requirements documents or user requirement documents. Gone are the days of the 400-page requirements, thank goodness. I remember I started a project for the Department of Education, and the first thing that I did was read through the 4,362 pages of business use cases and detailed use cases. We had a team of about, I would say, 400 people developing this system. No one had ever read the requirements from beginning to end, and so no one knew what they were designing from a holistic perspective. It took someone actually sitting down and reading all of them and creating some prototypes and testing them, even with our own development team, in order for us to understand what we were building. So documentation is more used now with my clients on creating personas, customer journeys, employee personas, employee journeys, ecosystem maps, perspective maps, value chain maps. The documentation has changed from these linear word-based things to visual creations that take people on a journey, whether they're the development team or the organization or the employees themselves. And we use those documents now to prototype and test. So for prototype and test, it's not always just a clickable prototype or annotated wireframes. It can be the documentation itself, whether those are interaction diagrams, storyboards, journey maps. And from that place, we finalize the design. That is not where it ends. In fact, we may go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and go back to 4 and 5, or even go back to 1. Again, this is an iterative process. If you look at our tent poles, we do iterate through our process and through the finalization of design. Again, people who are ingesting or hearing this information on a client side would like to see the steps you're going to take in a linear fashion. So that's why we put it this way for them. Our manifesto for working with folks includes early customer validation, solving the user problems over designing the next cool feature, which I will tell you, working with technologists on teams where their whole focus is creating a cool feature. having that balance of someone on the team who's looking for solving a user problem combined with someone who wants to build something cool, that combination right there has really helped when we build, design, implement for our clients. So bringing the whole team, the whole group of mindsets and mental models to a project or program or problem really helps develop and design a system that humans want to use that creates meaning and delight. Nimble design, these are status way of working with our clients. We want to make sure that we take this approach on every project in combination with our tent poles and our methodology. So I've talked a little bit about employee experience and how it's implemented at a digital workspace, in a digital workspace. So this is taking employee experience with UCX and creating a way of getting to a digital workspace. So the 6 steps are folded in here into research, discover, hypothesize and analyze, prototype and test, and synthesize and measure. This is UCX applied to our digital workspace. This is our methodology of how we create mindful, delightful employee experiences that affect customer experiences in a positive manner. So we're not just looking at productivity in the workplace. We're looking at how can we build systems that help our employees provide exceptional customer service to our customers and clients or members. This is behind the curtain look at how we do this with some activities and identified there on the slide. We also have perspectives of the digital workspace that we take, whether we're looking at the strategic, organizational, or platform perspectives, and then that value stream and value exchange I mentioned before. These are capabilities. We're building capabilities when we're deploying these platforms, and these are the capabilities in action in that value stream perspective. So here are some things that we might do, a journey, a methodology applied to a journey. We start with a planning workshop at a strategic level. We're framing the engagement. We're determining scoring factors of what it is exactly we're going to be doing from that strategic level. We might do some rough and ready prototypes of the different vetted initiatives and the usability testing that goes along with that. When I say usability testing in this specific instance, I am not in a lab with a camera and a double screen mirror. I am out in the field showing people things on paper, giving them a link potentially to something that looks like gray boxes and arrows. These are very nimble ways to get things that we framed in front of the user that reflect the strategic perspective early and often. And so we're able to come out with the vision and goals, objectives, charters, the plans. So as you can see, this is all of our activities, well, some of them, as applied to the perspectives and the methodology. So many people are looking these days at attracting and retaining top-tier talent. They want to increase internal productivity once they get that top-tier talent. We're onboarding a new employee. It's a hire to a retire value stream. There are different actors. There are things of information like new hire information, employee information that we need to get and give. And we're building capabilities here. So if a digital workspace capability for a client is I want my employees to be able to work from anywhere, and I'd also like to have the ability to communicate other than by phone or email, those are the concepts that we can apply across all the value exchanges, and that's where platform as a service comes into play in our digital workspace. Because once we build it for this value exchange of attracting, retaining top-tier talent, we can apply it to other scenarios in the company. Now we've got this platform that can leverage the capabilities from a technology perspective that we're building across other value exchanges. So taking it through a really high-level idea, step one, that the employee, this Johnny character, has been confirmed and he's ready to start and has been entered into the system. So HR has a process that they'd like to implement, and it includes instant messaging as a way of communicating, texting as a way of communicating. So imagine the last time you either hired someone or were hired yourself, and how out of context that process was. So we text as a primary form of communication, especially digital natives and Gen Xers, and even other generations are using text to communicate more and more. But often we don't receive communication from the organization in that way. And so when we're looking at how we want to attract and retain employees who are working at our company, because hopefully we have this employee experience that creates delight, we want to start the process, we want to start their onboarding with something that makes sense to them from a contextual perspective. So employing capabilities that we're building in the platform in our first interaction with a new employee is really important, and this is how that might look. So looking at another piece of documentation, another visual piece of documentation, we look at capabilities, services, solutions, and experience. And this is a hypothetical way to look at something from those different perspectives that we use when building digital workspaces from a mindful, value-centered way, human-centered way. The capabilities are listed below. So you might be building things like enterprise social networking, workflow. You might be looking at task automation, predictive analysis, your mobile capabilities or on the go, and how those come across in your services, and what solutions you're able to build from that, and then what experience the actor or user or human that this is focused on is having. Another example of how documentation is changing for our clients. This isn't detailed in a requirements document somewhere. This is it. Some sample deliverables that come out of this process include personas, process analysis, task analysis, which are really two sides of the same coin, wireframes, storyboards, prototypes. Of course, the visual design does come out as an output, and standards and templates. These days, I'm seeing less and less focus on the visual design standards and templates, and more about incorporating visual design and user experience templates and patterns together to create a style guide that is not just visually oriented, but that is oriented towards how do we want people to interact with these systems, processes, and technology. More sample deliverables of things that might come out of this. Business value assessment, the lean canvas. Again, you're looking at these deliverables, and the reason I'm showing you is because I want you to see these are not linear requirements. These are visual, engaging ways to communicate what we're up to, how we're building, how we're designing, how we're thinking to the organization as well as the users. The whole concept here is that people are living in a system, an ecosystem of many different pieces of technology, and they're operating in this network of knowledge. And technology is a tool to help these humans operate in that network. A couple examples of our, in this case, customer persona and a customer journey. We do the same for employees and employee journeys. Or on a page deliverable with capability and value streams. And we always leverage our industry references to jumpstart our activities. So for this case, it was for a bank, a very prominent bank, and we were able to put this together for them to show them all of those different things, to prototype and test them. We take the same approach from a micro, meso, and macro perspective as we do with the users to the organization. So, that being said, I have left about 15 minutes for question and answer, and I'd love to connect with you. I think that Ross was able to get the presentation out in a PDF format before we started. If you have any questions that come to you after the Q&A here in a minute, feel free to reach out via LinkedIn or via email. Thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
And thanks, Daniella. Okay, I hope our listeners found that as insightful as I did. And Daniella is now going to answer questions from our audience. And as a reminder, you can all still submit questions through the questions pane in your attendee control panel. Okay, our first question. And these, I'm reading these in order as they came in. So the first ones are going to probably relate more to the beginning of your presentation.
Sure, I can go around and back and forth as needed.
Okay. First question, how do large organizations determine when they've invested enough into making the employee experience as good as possible or good enough? How do you know where the tipping point is?
That's a great question. For our clients, most of the time, the concepts are so new that we're just trying to understand where they are in the map of all of this, in the ecosystem. And so a current state assessment, by going out and taking a pulse of the employees, trying to get back up there, in the get to know, and presenting that very quickly to the folks who are most interested, those business stakeholders. So to take it out of concept and put it into implementation, I would tell you, often we go out, we get to know, we do all kinds of activities to get to know. We do some analysis, and within a few days, we're able to get back to prototype and test with those business stakeholders. And oftentimes, we use a scoring mechanism that's available and out there to look at the different initiatives that we came out of during our get to know and help the business stakeholders identify those vetted initiatives and how important they are from a qualitative and quantitative place. So get to know, analyze, prototype and test quickly, business stakeholders, bring them in, give them a scoring mechanism, a way to measure, and a way to solve forward in a quantifiable and qualifiable way, both.
Thanks.
So that tipping point.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That tipping point is co-created. It's not something that we come in with and say, here's when it's good enough. It's good enough when we all decide it's good enough. It's a collaborative process.
Great, thank you. Okay, our next question. A listener says, I get how making it easy for workers to do their jobs lowers their frustration and helps them deliver better service. Do you see the value more in a direct impact to customers or more for employee retention?
I've seen it both. I can give you a really quick example of how both came about on a recent project. We were hired by this company, a global manufacturing company, to redesign their customer experience, and really they wanted to go on that digital mastery path I spoke about. And so we were doing a full-scale business transformation around the organizational ideas of we want a better customer experience. We helped them define what better meant, delightful meant for their customers. And in doing that, we found huge gaps for the employees. So for instance, when a customer came onto one of their many websites, their digital properties, they had a phone number that they could call for customer service if they had a question. And they have a very complicated product line. This is not just an out-of-the-box purchase. This is a configurable manufacturing thing that's in very dangerous environments. So customer service, they call, and the first thing that the customer service rep had to do was ask them, well, what website are you on? So then the customer would repeat back the URL, often omitting things or thinking they were one place and they were other. So we recorded several of these calls. Customer service reps would spend anywhere between 5 and 8 minutes with the customer just trying to determine where they were in the digital story. After they did that, there was a lot of questions about functionality on the site of how they could configure what they were looking for. The customer service rep spent anywhere between 6 to 9 minutes just going through how to use the configuration tool on the website. At this point in the conversations we recorded, there was so much frustration between the customer and the employee. The employee was constantly apologizing for this experience to their customer, and oftentimes would result to, let me just email you the brochure. In that project, when we were first starting our get to know, we found a lot of opportunities. And how that came about was the organizational imperative, let's create a delightful customer experience.
Okay, and this question seems to be somewhat related. The listener asks, every company now seems to have an onboarding process, which seems to be about getting users to deal with the shortcomings of the systems they've already invested in. How do you overcome a business's reluctance to change because of a previous investment?
So we talked a little bit about leveraging the foundation in place. I recently worked with a company who the onboarding process was, I think we calculated it at 102 steps from beginning to end. Many of those steps were perceived technology constraints. They were workarounds about what they thought their platform could and could not do. So the first thing we did was look at the technology they had in place and assess it from an objective point of view. What we learned was the folks in HR hadn't been trained on how to use the system well in this particular case, and so just by getting everyone up to speed on the systems they had in place, we were able to take it down to around 32 steps, which is still far too many. It should be 3 steps. But just that reduction was a huge win for the company. And then we were able to talk to them about program instead of project. So what I'm finding in customer engagements is that they're really focused on a project. Again, this is how we've designed employee experience from the very beginning. There's a need. Our onboarding process is crappy. Nobody likes it. We're losing potential employees. It takes too long. That yada, yada, yada t-shirt of all the things that people say when they're dissatisfied and not having a good experience were coming up. And so the organization is like, gosh, we have this need, and it's reacting to something. So when we look at it from a program perspective and pull it out of this onboarding project that they're looking at and look at it holistically, oftentimes the case to invest in the technology after we've leveraged what's in place makes itself. And so I will tell you also, anecdotal information goes a long way with executive stakeholders, decision makers. If they hear quotes on recorded conversations and interviews from people pretty much lambasting their process, company, whatever the case may be, oftentimes it's a difficult meeting to have, but you we're able to influence the decision makers very quickly. So I use that technique a lot. And I've only almost to be fired a couple times in doing so. So the risk is not as great as the reward on that.
Great. The next question, can you talk more about what the early customer validation looks like? Is the customer actually the customer or the employee in this case?
Early validation, I didn't understand the question. Can you repeat it?
Can you talk more about what early customer validation looks like?
Mm-hmm.
Is the customer or the employee?
Again, talking back to that previous example, to me, they're all customers, right? That sounds really cheesy, but it's true. And so folks who are on the inside of a system rather than the outside of a system, think about how that works together. We don't separate in our minds, okay, now I'm working outside the system, now I'm working inside the system. The experience is really the same, really. So if an employee is having a frustrating experience in that example I gave you earlier, the customer is probably reaping an effect of that frustrating experience. So internal or early validation of any experience happens in the get to know and analyze by going out and talking to people and developing empathy and not doing things like surveys, but actually witnessing, hearing and seeing people, witnessing them in their job and their tasks, whether that's job and task employee or experience job and task from customer. Validation is never taken on someone's word, although we do use the inputs of the different stakeholders as a place to start. So I'll go back down here. This really helps set some expectations anytime we start an engagement. We tell them from the get-go, what you think is happening is not what's happening, and be prepared to hear and see things that will surprise you. And be prepared to hear and see things that you're not going to be super excited about. But that's why we're here. We're going to help you solve for it, get through that, and understand exactly what's happening, not what you think is happening from a top-down approach.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Aside from offering employee development and great benefits, how else do you create an environment that makes a great employee experience?
Wow, there's so many ways. I would say, based on the over close to 5,000 interviews I've done with employees over the last 7 years, one way to do that at a very conceptual level is to fulfill your obligations, fulfill what you say you're going to do, walk your talk. So if one of your corporate values is fun, make sure that your systems that they're using aren't terrible. Make sure that you are reinforcing what you say your values are, your stated values, with your demonstrated values by investing the time and money in creating systems that work for your employees. So I can give you a system that many people start with, which is an intranet. And oftentimes an intranet has been created over the years, and there are tasks that are most important to users buried inside of the intranet, let's say entering time, that they can only get to if they save a favorite, for goodness sake, in their browser, or if they have a link in the navigation that they somehow know to get to. If a task that's important to your users is buried in your system somewhere that's hard to get to, that causes frustration. That causes cognitive dissonance. They're telling me that this is important. They're telling me I'm their greatest asset. But to do a simple task like entering my time takes me 3 times longer than it should, because no one's made an effort to even just float this link up to the top of our intranet. Is a very tactical example. gosh, using the technology that we use outside of the business, in the walls of the organization. That example of onboarding an employee using different communication tools that we all use every day and not relying just on email. If you tell people that you want email to be less of the way that we communicate inside the organization, but you don't offer them another way that's easy to use, again, your demonstrated values are not matching your stated values. So I would say anytime you can build something that matches those two things together in a system, technology, or process, you're going to go a long way with your employees, and that experience that will lessen and lessen over time.
Great, that makes perfect sense. Okay, and our last question isn't so much a question. It looks like somebody just posted one of their favorite quotes in here. And the quote is, "Everyone wants to be a valued member of a winning team on an inspiring mission." And it's attributed to Graham Weston. I don't know if you have any comment on that.
No, that is very true. The basic human needs, right, Mendelssohn's hierarchy of needs apply, but those are just table stakes these days, everyone. People want to be witnessed, they want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be understood, and they want to be able to contribute at a level that they're capable of. And so when we don't apply design thinking and systems thinking to our businesses, you're limiting what they're able to contribute because it takes them so long to do menial tasks, or what you're saying and what you're doing don't match, and there's a level of cognitive dissonance and frustration. And people want to contribute. People want to do a lot more than we're enabling them and empowering them to do. So I completely agree with that quote. It's a great quote.
Terrific. Well, that is our last question, and we're just about out of time. So I just want to thank you again, Daniella, and thanks for all of our listeners for attending our webinar, The Employee Experience Revolution, Unicorns, the Talent Race, and Customer Success. All attendees are going to receive a follow-up email with a link to view the recording of today's webinar. Also, Daniella's slide deck is available as the handout here through the conference that you can download and review at your convenience. We also encourage you to share that the download link for the recorded webinar with your professional network. And one last thing, Bestica produces this ongoing series of webinars for the purpose of bringing relevant content to our community of UX professionals. So if you'd like to be considered as a speaker for a future webinar, please send me your contact information to ross@bestica.com. That's BESTICA.com. And on behalf of Bestica and our presenter, Daniella Matutes, I want to thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Ross. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Daniella.
All right. Everyone have a great week.